everyone, I'm Gertie and we're back with the Popover Dress video. So if you haven't watched part 1, do check that out because in that one we go over all the steps to make the basic dress without the little add-on touches like the shoulder bows and the pockets. Today we're going to show you those little extra touches. So we're going to start with constructing the pockets and sewing them onto the dress. And then we're going to make these little shoulder bows and I'll show you how to tie them on. So let's go ahead and get started.
We're starting with the pockets. You should have your pocket piece, which looks like this, and your pocket facing piece. Start by finishing the raw edges on the bottom of the facing piece. So use your serger to finish that straight edge. And then just to save yourself a little time later, while you're at the serger, I would recommend finishing on the pocket, the 3 straight sides of the pocket itself. Don't worry about that curved upper edge because that's just going to get enclosed in this seam anyway. All right, next thing we're going to do is put these right sides together, and there will be notches at the top to match, but it's pretty easy to see how the shapes go together here. Pin them together, and then you're going to stitch around all 4 sides of this pocket at 5/8 of an inch. So even though we're just attaching the 2 pieces together at the top, I want you to stitch all around each side of the pocket. And I have one handily finished now. So you can see that there is stitching all the way around. I pivoted at the bottom corners, and you're going to see why I did that in just a second. But the next step is to trim away the seam allowances on the upper curved edge of the pocket. And an easy way to do this is to use pinking shears. You don't have to use pinking shears, but I like to do this because then you don't have to worry about notching the seam allowances up on those curves. Normally you would want to notch those because that is an outer curve. But pinking shears sort of automatically notch things for you. So I'm going to trim down these seam allowances pretty close. You don't want to leave a lot there. And then down here, just kind of like veer off the edge there because you don't need to remove the seam allowances down here. Next thing we're going to do is turn this right side out. And then I'm going to take this to the ironing board and I'm going to press in the seam allowances using that 5/8 of an inch stitching as my guide stitching here. Kind of like we talked about on the hem on the last video. You're going to use that guide stitching as a guide on where you should press. So you're going to turn the guide stitching so it's just to the wrong side of the pocket and press it. So press in those edges around the corners. And then around the top, just make sure that it's as smooth as possible. Roll those seam lines out to the edge. Make sure you're getting a nice smooth curve up there and then press those flat. So I'm going to go ahead and iron and then we'll come back and place these pockets on our dress. We're going to place our pockets on the dress. So this is the side seam of my dress right here. My 2 pocket marks that we talked about making in part 1 of the video are right here. There's a white X chalk mark and another one right here. Now I'm going to place my pocket. I'm placing it flat like this, and you're going to align the bottom corner of the pocket with the lower pocket mark on the dress, and the upper mark should be aligned with this mark at the upper edge of your pocket. And what's going to happen is these are going to align right here. You're going to lay the pocket flat here, and then you'll know that it's aligned correctly. So that's why I was saying you don't need to worry about those other marks because these 2 are parallel to each other. So once you have those laid out, you should be fine. The next thing, and the way this works, is that this flap is going to fold over like this. See how cute that is? But the next thing we're going to do is pin all the way around from the upper mark on the pocket all the way around to the other upper mark. And this is a little awkward because now we have 2 layers of dress that we're going to have to kind of maneuver in between. You only want to pin the pocket to the front of the dress. So I'm going to pin all the way around, again, starting at that upper mark on the pocket. Make sure you're only pinning the upper layer. Pin all the way around to the other upper mark. And next thing we're going to do is take this to the machine and edge stitch around the pocket to attach it to the dress.
We're going to place the dress underneath the presser foot
And again, make sure you're just stitching one layer, so you don't want to have the back layer underneath your presser foot, just the front. Smooth it out so you don't have any excess underneath there. And starting at your top chalk mark on the fabric, on the pocket, you are going to stitch, this is an edge stitch, so it should really be right on the edge of that pocket. And back stitching is really important here because the top of a pocket gets a lot of wear. And you can even come back and put some bar tacks at the top of that pocket if you think you're going to be putting a lot of heavy stuff like your phone in there. So, but for now, let's just edge stitch around here. Try to get this out of your way. We're going to stitch, I would say it's kind of like between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch. We're stitching all the way around. This is the folded under edge of my pocket. And you're going to keep stitching until you get to the bottom. Take those pins out as you go. If you're uncomfortable just pinning this, you can always hand baste first. A lot of people like to do that. Okay, when you're on the very edge of that corner, you're gonna stop with your needle down and you're gonna lift up your presser foot. I'm using my knee lift, which I love, because you can do this hands-free. And now I'm gonna swing around to the other side of the pocket and continue stitching forward on the edge. Oops. I usually like to orient my pins so that the heads are over here because that makes it a little easier to pull out for me, to pull out the pins. But on this pocket, the orientation is just a little different. All right, so if you see anything like this where you can see that fold of the pocket, try to kind of like smush it underneath there again because we don't want to see any folds showing at the edge of the pocket. So again, you're going to stop with your needle down right on the edge, lift that presser foot up, pivot, and continue around, and this is the last side you're stitching. And don't forget to stop at your chalk mark and back stitch. You don't want to stitch all the way up to the upper edge because then you won't get that cute little flap effect. All right, I can see my chalk mark right there, so I'm making sure I don't go any further than that. So when I get there, this is where I'm going to back stitch. And I'm just going to go forward a couple stitches just to reinforce. There. And again, if you want to, you can come back and do a bar tack there, which is just some really tightly spaced zigzag stitching. But I think I should be fine with this. So now when I fold it over and I give a light little press, it's going to create that flap for us there. Look how cute. Okay, next thing we're going to be talking about is the shoulder bows. You have 2 of the shoulder bows to start, and you're going to put them right sides together like this and pin all the way around, matching those edges. Next thing you're going to do is stitch all the way around. And very important, this seam allowance is only a 1/4 inch. Okay, I didn't want to put a big seam allowance that you would then have to trim off, so I made this a 1/4 inch. So you can even use the edge of your presser foot as a guide to stitch that. Very important as well, you want to leave a little opening to turn this right side out. So about 1.5 to 2 inches should be fine. I like to do it in the middle of the bow because then you won't see it once it's tied, because we're going to edge stitch that closed. Okay, next thing we're going to do is trim down after you've stitched those bows all the way around. You're going to trim down the points. So I would start by trimming flat across like that, and then make an angled trim into each point. And so what I've done there is just remove any bulk from the point itself. I'm going to do the same on this side. And then we're going to turn this little bow right side out. And this is where, I made my opening a little small. This is where something like a knitting needle or a chopstick will come in handy, because you can kind of get in there with it and press that point out. So I'm going to turn this all the way right side out, I'm going to roll the seam lines out to the edges and then press the whole thing flat, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. I've turned the bow right side out and pressed it and really poked those little corners out. And then I just did a little line of edge stitching to close that gap. If you like to hand stitch, you can also just easily slip stitch that closed. But I did the edge stitching because, like I said, it's going to be hidden under the shoulder anyway. So let me show you really quickly how you're going to tie this onto your dress. You're going to thread this underneath your shoulder. And great tip I read in the Facebook group, Gertie Sew and Tell, by the way, is that you can put these on after you put your dress on and thread these underneath your bra straps to hold the dress in place if you have problems with your dress falling off your shoulder. So I thought that was an awesome tip. Thank you, ladies. Okay, so I've threaded it underneath the shoulder of the dress, and now we're just going to tie it into a simple knot. And the fun thing about the shape of this bow is that it forms a bow shape on its own. So once you're happy with the look of the knot, you can then kind of play around. And this is the kind of thing that I will mess around with all day. But once you're happy with how that looks, it should go sort of parallel with your shoulder like that. And it looks really cute once it's tied on. So let's take a look at it on the form.
Now you've put on your shoulder bows and your pockets, and you have a completed popover dress. So I hope you have loved sewing along with me, and this is just a reminder that this pattern is in my new book, Gertie Sews Jiffy Dresses, and there are a lot more easy, fast dresses in that book. So I hope you love them, and I hope you love your new popover dress.